Hello friends, happy to see you once again. I am Vidyalakshmi from English department. Today we are going to see the next part of this voice. So in this class, change of voice in the infinitive. So till the last video we have seen about the sentences. How can we change this assertive sentence in active voice to passive voice? Then interrogative, how it can be changed from active voice into passive voice. Then imperative sentences we have seen. In this class we are going to see about the infinitive. If we use the infinitive in active voice, which part of the verbs we have to change? That we are going to see in this class. So, when we use this infinitive, you know very well what does mean by infinitive? Infinitive is coming under the topic of non-finites. So, if you take this infinitive, there we have two types. One is to infinitive, another one is bare infinitive. So, one is to infinitive and another one is bare infinitive. That you have studied. I hope that you know very well about that. If you don't know, just you can refer that. Okay. So, in this sentence, if you take these examples, here you can see you will have to do it. Women like men to flatter them. You have got to do it. You will have to perform it. If you take these sentences, here the main verb is will have. Okay. So, after this main verb, we have used this to do. After this main verb, one more verb we have used it. So, that is to do. The combination of to and the verb. Okay, the combination of to and the verb is called as infinitive, especially to infinitive. So, in the first sentence, we have used the to infinitive to do. Then we can go to the second active voice. Okay, second sentence. Women like men to flatter them. Okay, here like is the main verb. Then to flatter is the to infinitive we have used here. If you take the third example, you have got to do it. So here got is the main verb. To do is the infinitive. Then last example, you will have to perform it. So once again, will have is the main verb. Will have is taking the role of this main verb here. Then to perform is the infinitive that we used here in the sentence. Okay. Now I am going to explain you where we have to do the change while we are changing this active voice into passive voice. So we should not do any changes in the main verb. Okay. We should not do any changes in the main verb. Then where we have to do the changes? So we have used the rule for future tense. So what is the rule for future tense? We have to introduce the be form of the verb be, isn't it? The same rule we are going to follow here also. But where we have to introduce that be means in the form of this to infinitive. We have used the to infinitive. So there we have to do these changes. So what is the formation for this to infinitive while we are changing it into passive voice? We have to use this to. After this to, we have to use the be form of verb be. Then we have to use the third form of the verb. So we have to use the third form of the verb. So this is the procedure while we are changing this active voice into passive voice. If it is given in infinitive, if we have used that infinitive in active voice. Okay. So if the infinitive is given in active voice, we have to follow this structure while we are changing that into passive voice. Okay. Now I am going to explain the examples. So you will have to do it. Okay. So here it is taking the role of this object. So as per our rule, we are going to bring this it in the place of subject while we are changing it into passive voice. Okay. So it, as I stated, will have is the main verb. So we are not going to do any changes in that main verb. So it will have. Then what about the infinitive we used here? To do. Okay. So to as it is. To mention that infinitive, to as it is we are using. So as I stated, we have to introduce the be form of verb. Isn't it? So we have introduced that be form of verb after to. Okay. So we have introduced this be. Then the third form of this verb do is done. So it will have to be done. As usual, we'll be introducing the preposition by. Then what about the subject here? Here the subject is you. We are bringing that subject in the place of object here in passive voice. Okay. So it will have to be done by you. Now I'll explain about the second sentence. Women like men to flatter them. Women like men to flatter them. Here, if we take this example, here what about the object? Object is them, isn't it? What about that them? Whom does it refer? This them refers the women. Then them refers the women. That's why in passive voice we have taken that women as it is. That means here the object is mentioning about the women. That's why we mention that women directly here. Okay. So women. Then what about the main verb we have used in active voice here? Like. Okay. So as I stated, we should not do any changes in main verb. We have written that like as it is. Okay. Then what about the to infinity we have used? To flatter. So what is the structure? We have to use the to. After the to, we have to introduce this be. Then third form of this flatter is flattered. Then we introduce the preposition by. Then what about the object here? So that men. Now what about the subject here? Men. So that men we brought it in the place of object here. Okay. So women like to be flattered by men. Okay. So here the object is them. This them mentions about this women. So we brought that women in the place of subject. Then the verb as it is we have used here. The main verb as it is we have used here. Then to infinitive is flatter. So we have used the to. Then after the to we introduce the be form of verb be. Then V3 for this flatter is flattered. Then by we have introduced. Then what about the subject here? Men we are considering as subject. So that subject has brought in the place of object. Okay. Then third one, you have got to do it. You have got to do it. So this S is the object. We brought it in the place of subject. Then here the main verb is have. While we are changing this have into passive voice, we have written as has. Why? Because here the subject is given in second person. That's why we have used this have. In active voice, the subject is given as second person. That's why we use the verb as have. But take it in the form of passive voice. So the subject in passive voice, the subject is given in singular, third person singular. So you know very well for third person singular, we have to use this has, isn't it? That's why we have changed this have into has. Okay, but as per our rule, we told that we should not do any changes in main verb. Okay, but in this sentence, as per subject verb agreement, we have changed this verb, main verb into has because the subject is given in third person singular. Okay. Then got as it is we have used it. Okay. In active voice also it is given as got. In active voice also it is given as got. That's why we have used that. So you know very well this is present perfect. The main verb is used in present perfect form. So we have used the present perfect form in passive voice also. Then what about the to infinitive? To do. So how did we change the to do? To be done. Because this is infinitive. So after to we introduce the be. Then third form of the verb done we have used here. So it has got to be done. Okay. So by you can write or else it will be understand the. Okay. Yes. Now we can see about the last example. You will have to perform it. You will have to perform it. Again, here also the object is it. So we use that it. We brought that it in the place of subject. Then the main verb will have as it is we have used here. Then to perform we have changed it into to be performed. Then the subject is by. Then by you. Okay. So we have written in this format. So once again I'll be saying if active voice if it is given in infinitive, that we should not do any changes in main verb while we are changing it into passive voice. So where we have to do the changes means we have to do the changes only in the form of infinitive. So now we are going to say and as active voice we have used the prepositional verbs. And as active voice we have used the prepositional verbs. You know very well what does mean by prepositional verbs? Prepositional verbs is nothing. Along with this verbs we'll be using the preposition. Okay, that is called as prepositional verbs. So while we are changing these prepositional verbs into passive voice, what should we do that we are going to see here? Okay, so first I'll be explaining in all these 4 examples what are the prepositional verbs we have used. Okay, so they spoke to him. Second one, he acted upon my advice. Third one, someone was knocking at the door. Last one, why are you laughing at the poor beggar? These are the 4 examples I have given here. So if you take these 4 examples, here the first 3 examples I have used in assertive form. What about the 4th example? I have given in the form of interrogative. Okay, because you should know how to change these assertive phrasal verbs as well as how to change these interrogative phrasal verbs, prepositional verbs. So how to change these prepositional verbs if it is given in assertive? How to change these prepositional verbs if it is given in interrogative? Okay. So here, what is the prepositional verbs we have used in the first sentence? First example, as I stated, prepositional verbs is nothing when this verb will be using the preposition. That we are mentioning as prepositional verbs. Okay. So they spoke to him. What is the prepositional verb we used in the first sentence? Spoke to. Spoke is the verb. Then to is the preposition. So we are mentioning the spoke to as prepositional verb. Okay. Then if we take the second example, he acted upon my advice. So what is the verb we have used here? Acted. Then what about the preposition? Upon. So what is the prepositional verb we used here? Acted upon. Okay. Third one, someone was knocking at the door. What is the verb here? Was knocking is the verb we used in the third sentence. What about the tense? Which form of the tense we have used here? Was knocking. So was knocking is given in the form of past continuous. Okay. So, what is the prepositional verb we used in the sentence? Was knocking at. Was knocking at as the prepositional verb we used in the sentence. Okay. Then we can come to the last example. Why are you laughing at the poor beggar? So, if you take this example, here how can you find the verb what we have used? Just you can't say are alone as the verb, or else you can't say that laughing alone as the verb. Okay, because you may get that confusion. In between this are and laughing, we have used the subject you, isn't it? Why we have used that subject you in between this auxiliary and the main verb? Because this is the interrogative sentence. Okay, the two WH question. So WH question, it has to follow by the auxiliary verb. Then only we have to use the subject. Then we are mentioning about the main verb. Okay. That's why we brought this subject in between the auxiliary and the main verb. Okay. So, what is the verb we have used in this interrogative sentence? Are laughing. So, are laughing is the verb we have used in this interrogative sentence. Okay. So, what about this prepositional verb we have used here? Are laughing at. So, are laughing at is the prepositional verb. So, while we are changing this prepositional verbs into passive voice, what rule we have to follow means we should not omit this preposition while we are changing into passive voice. We should not drop this preposition. We should not drop this preposition while we are changing this active voice into passive voice. So, it has to stay with the main verb only. Okay, the preposition has to stay with the main verb only. It should not be omitted. Okay, that is the rule while we are changing this prepositional verb from active voice into passive voice. Okay, so just I am going to explain about the first sentence now. So, here they spoke to him. It is given. They spoke to him is given here. So, you know very well what is the object of this active voice? Him is the object of this active voice. So, we are going to bring this object in the place of subject while we are changing into passive voice. So, is it possible for us to use this him as it is? No, it's not possible, isn't it? So, here we have to apply that rule that changes a pronoun. Okay, when do we change this him? This him to be changed into he. Isn't it? He is given means we are changing that he into him or his. Isn't it? So, we are changing this him into he because it is coming in the place of subject. Okay. So, we have changed this him into he here. Then, what about this spoke? What verb is it? The spoke is given in the form of past tense. You know very well. The main verb is given in past tense. Which form of be verb we have to introduce the? Either was or were. Isn't it? Here we have used this was. Why? Because the subject is singular. Especially the subject is third person singular. That's why we have used this was. Then what about the third form of speak? We know very well. First form of spoke is speak, isn't it? So we have to find out the third form of the root verb. So the root verb of this spoke is speak. Okay, root form of this spoke is speak. So what is the third form of this speak? Spoken. Okay, so was spoken. Because the verb is given in past form, that's why we have used this was spoken. Then as per our rule, we should not drop this preposition. Why? Because prepositional verbs is given here. So we should not leave the preposition here. We should not drop that preposition here. So we use that spoken to. Okay. Then as per our rule, we have introduced this by. Then we are bringing that subject in the place of object here. So what is the subject here? They. So we have changed that they into them. Okay. So once again I will be reading this. So he was spoken to by them. Clear? Then we can go to the second example. He acted upon my advice. He acted upon my advice. So here what about the object? My advice is the object. Okay. So we brought that my advice in the place of subject. Then what about the verb? Again it is given in past form. The verb acted is given in past form. So you know very well, we have to use either was or were. So here advice is singular. That's why we use this was. Then V3 of this act is acted. Then what is the preposition we have used here after the verb? Upon. So that preposition as it is we have used here. Then we introduce this by. Then he is given here. So as per the rule, we have to change that he into him. Okay. My advice was acted upon by him. Then we can go to the third one. Someone was knocking at the door. So the object is the door. So that's why we have used this the door. We brought in the place of subject. Then what about the verb here? Was knocking. What tense is it? Past continuous. The tense is given in the form of past continuous. So what is the rule we have to apply while we are using this past continuous in active voice? What B form of verb we have to introduce here? Exactly, we have to introduce the B form of verb being. Okay, so the door was, we introduce the B form of verb being because the verb is given in continuous form. That's why we introduce this B form of verb being here. Then here, knock is the main verb. For knocking, verb 1 is knock. So V3 of knock is knocked. Okay. So was being knocked. Then you should not forget that we have to use that preposition along with the verb. Okay. That's why we have used it at here. Then by as per rule we are introducing. Then the subject is someone here. We brought that subject in the place of object, someone. Okay. So the door was being knocked at by someone. The door was being knocked at by someone. Now we can take the last example. This last example is given in the form of interrogative. So why are you laughing at the poor beggar? You know very well how to change these interrogative sentences. It was explained in the previous videos. Okay, you can go through if you have any doubt. Okay, in the transformation of sentences. Okay, so now I will be explaining about this. So as it is interrogative sentence, the WH question word as it is we have used here. Then what about this object? The poor beggar. So we brought that poor beggar in the place of subject here. Why did we use here yes? In the question it is given as are. But we have changed it in the form of s. Do you know the reason? Can you find out the reason? Yes, exactly. The poor beggar. The subject is the poor beggar. So the poor beggar is singular. That's why we have used this are into is. Okay, the subject is singular. That's why we have changed this are into yes. Then what about this being? Why did we introduce? Because here we have used present continuous. Are laughing is present continuous. So we know very well if the verb is given in continuous, we have to introduce this being. That's why we have used this being here. Then laughing, one of laughing is laugh. We have to change that verb 1 into verb 3. So verb 3 is laughed. Then what about the preposition at? So the preposition as it is we have used here. Okay, at, then by. What about the subject here? You is the subject. That's why we brought that subject in the place of object here. Okay, as it is the question, we are using the question mark at the end of this sentence. Okay, so once again I will be reading the answer. Why is the poor beggar being laughed at by you? Okay, so once again I will be reminding you that if it is prepositional verb, along with the verbs we have to use that preposition. We should not drop that preposition. That is the rule we have to follow while we are changing this active voice into passive voice. I hope that this class will be clear for you. Thank you.